Welcome to Sales Talk for CEOs. I'm glad you're here. I'll be interviewing CEOs who have successfully scaled their B2B sales organization. In each episode, I'll start by uncovering the sales background of each CEO, dig into the strategies they use to build their sales organization, and wrap it up with what the future holds. We'll cover the good, the bad, and the ugly of scaling a sales organization. I'm your host, Alice Hyman. Welcome. I'm so glad you're all here. Today is the first time I'm doing a different type of show. Now, if you've been following my podcast, you know that usually I interview CEOs of companies who are 5+ years in business and 5+ million in sales, and they have built a sales organization of some type, and we're learning about how they built it and some of the things that happened along the way. But I've decided to start building some episodes with experts that can talk to CEOs about some things they really need to know about sales. And so today I'm excited because I have my friend Tonya here with me. We are good friends, so disclosure. We're in a mastermind group together and we work together. I invite her in to meet my clients and do the work that she does for them because she is magnificent at what she does. And so I bring her to you today to really help you understand about how to truly listen to your customer and then actually do something with that information once you have it. So welcome, Tonya.
Thank you,
now,
Alice.
I didn't say your last name because I always say it wrong, but go ahead and say it for us.
It's a tough one.
Bjurstrom. Oh,
Bjurstrom.
beer. I know how to say beer.
Yes.
Bjurstrom. And all this
there you
time
go.
I know you.
Yeah,
I
if you see it spelled.
refrain from using your last name because I don't want to say it wrong.
That was the very first minutes of conversation with my husband when I met him were me trying to guess how to spell the last name, which I got nowhere
All right.
close,
Well, I like beer, so now I'm just going to remember it's Bjurstrom, and now we're over that.
Good.
So
there you go.
Thanks for being here. Your company is Dirby Group, yes? And you are doing voice of the customer work. Now, let's start with an explanation of what is voice of the customer? What does that entail? What do you do? And how is it that you came to be doing this really important work?
You know, I'll start with the second part first, which is how I started doing this, which is much like you, I, was able to have a very successful career in sales and did a lot of different things within sales, from marketing to business development, worked with all different sized companies, from, startups to SMB to, large global organizations, enterprise technical sales. And, what I found is in all these different roles, all these different sizes of companies, really the sweet spot for my success was in understanding how to ask customers the right questions in the right way to uncover insight that could help me to grow both within that customer as well as within those customer networks, that real organic growth. And when I was approached a few years ago to do some consulting for some tech companies that knew of the type of work that I did, I found that these organizations, they just weren't doing it. Either A, they didn't have the resources to have the kind of conversations with customers that I found to be so successful, or B, they really didn't know how to do it, right? I mean, they knew how to treat their customers very well. Customers were very important to them. They'd support them, but they didn't know how to have these types of conversations. So that's where I decided to, focus Dirby on voice of the customer. And really what we do is we tap into the abundance of valuable insight and new opportunity that is always existing within a customer base. And in order to access that, you need more than an online survey, right? I think online surveys are ubiquitous right now. And they have a place. There's definitely data that can be collected and used as a result of that. But if that is the primary touch point that you have for customer feedback, you are missing
definitely
out.
Not
you are
a place
not
where AI can do the job. You need a human to do this
right.
job. And every CEO knows that they need to listen to their customers. But what's amazing is that they just don't do it. They don't have their team doing it. Like you said, they may put up a survey or they ask for a testimonial occasionally, but they don't really insist that their team dig in and really ask the tough questions of the customer. And of course, because that's really hard to do, right? A salesperson isn't really going to, first of all, know what questions to ask. And even if they do, I don't know that the customer they're talking to is going to feel comfortable telling them how they actually feel about something because they've built a relationship, that revolves around trust, and they've done some things together, and no one wants to deliver the bad news, right? So there's all these reasons why salespeople aren't going to find this out. And sometimes the marketing people step in and they'll try to do some kind of surveying, but they don't really get to the bottom of it either. But, in today's market, things have changed so much. Our buyer has changed. We all know, everybody's talking about how digital our buyers are. They're getting all their information about you online between 9 and midnight when they have time to do their research, right? And they want that readily available to them. And so it's just changed everything. And the buyer journey has changed, and most companies haven't checked in with the buyers that they're selling to, right, to get that information. So thinking about the fact that CEOs are, of course, very interested in their senior leadership team getting the acquisition of new customers, the retention of existing customers, and the growth of those existing customers. We have to look at all of that. And some of us get a little carried away on the new logo side of things and not paying enough attention to the retention and growth. So explain how a CEO could use this voice of the customer information for the retention and growth of their existing customers that are so important to their bottom line.
There is so much information in regard to the importance of retention, and the importance of it just purely to profitability, right? And so, what you had said about the salespeople, right, being the primary contact point for customers. Of course they are. That makes sense. But number one, those salespeople, it is human nature. They are going to bring assumption and bias to the conversations that they have with their customers. Even if they are a very, skilled salesperson, they understand how to, appropriately do discovery. They're following all the guidelines that you provide in the coaching and the training and the advising that you do. They still bring assumption and bias to what to what those conversations result in with their customers. And then the customers are the same. Human nature impacts how comfortable they are providing feedback. So having a third party come in, whether it be my organization or other organizations like mine that come in and have these conversations, it provides a fresh perspective not only to the sales organization within a company, but to that executive leadership that can completely shift the ability to retain customers. And they can do that through all different points within the customer journey. And that's one of the things that's really important is that CEOs, as they are guiding their organizations, that they stay focused on the entire customer journey. Because, I define the difference between customer satisfaction and customer experience as, customer satisfaction is the feeling that a customer has at any given point in time about an interaction that they've had with your company. Whereas customer experience is the entire accumulation of every interaction from when they first, become introduced to your brand until, they get the invoice for their renewal contract.
The customer experience is from hello to loyal customer. that entire distance
Love
we
that.
have got
Yes.
to be keenly aware of.
Yes.
And, people find us many different ways, but the most likely way an executive is going to find a company that can help their business is by asking other executives they know and trust, hey, who do you use to do this kind of work, right? That's going to be pretty common for an executive. Now, mid-level managers sometimes will just start right on Google, right, and start looking and then maybe ask around a bit. But the senior level executives that I work with, and over the many, many years that I have, they ask someone they trust. Then they go to Google and start looking, right? And so that very first impression that they get, I mean, sometimes it's really awful. Like somebody might even say great things about you, and then the prospect goes to your website, and your website does not clearly explain what you do, nor does it match what the person who referred you said. So, bam, you're gone, right? So from hello, right, from that moment, and all those micro moments where they're trying to figure out who you are and what you do, all the way to loyal customer. And you, as a CEO, need to understand that experience. And the only way to do that is to ask the person who went through the experience.
Right. Exactly. Right. Who better to help you understand why companies should buy your product than companies who bought your product. Right. And so, deep, true voice of the customer work, CEOs are able to understand to a deep level where that engagement is happening throughout that entire process. And I think that's really the key benefit of these types of programs is it is not just a customer satisfaction survey. It is voice of the customer and how to improve the overall customer experience. And as a CEO, that's
job.
That is
CEOs
what they
have
need to
so
focus
much
on.
to do. And we all recognize this. And you and I both run companies as well as sell and deliver and do a lot of things. So as a CEO, we know there are many hats to wear, and the larger your organization gets, right, the more you have to depend on the people who report to you to be super smart and do a great job. And you've got to look over the health and well-being of the entire organization. But you also have to stay focused outward on the customer, because the minute you lose sight of that, internally your organization starts doing things that are going to make it very difficult to grow the business because they're focused inward instead of outward on the customer. So they do things in a vacuum thinking, oh, this will be great for the customer. They'll want this, or we'll do it this way, without understanding how that impacts the customer. So I think that the CEO is, among many things, the chief customer experience officer, making sure that that customer experience is always foremost on everyone's mind. Now, we all know that many companies make it really hard for people to buy from them. It sounds crazy because they're out there selling, but they're making it really hard. I'm always asking CEOs, what have you done today to make it easier to be your customer and harder to be your competitor?
Oh my gosh, that's such a great question.
With that,
I love that
if you start thinking, okay, probably the answer is, I don't know. I might know a few things, but when you use voice of the customer to have someone go and really ask, is it easy to be our customer? And find out why it's easy or why it might not be easy, you bring these things back. So I want to hear a couple stories, because I'm sure you've got one or two where you found out something that really made a difference to a company. And this, at the senior level, the CEO and the senior team were able to take that information and actually do something with it to improve their company and help their company grow.
Absolutely. This is my favorite part, is when I get to talk about these things. So, one of them is, I was doing work for an organization that focused on the logistics industry. And they were a software development company, and they would add in some custom features to applications specifically for their clients. And their largest client They'd done business with them for a long time, had a great relationship. And we did a voice of the customer program. I interviewed this client, and what we found was that they had some custom development that had been delayed. That it was very important to that end user client. The custom development had been delayed for several months. My client was aware that their customer wasn't particularly happy about it, but they were doing what they could to get the development done. Well, through this interview, what I found was that this big customer was starting to look at alternative solutions. And my client was not aware that they were doing this, which happens, right? The primary contact point, he had let my client know that he wasn't happy with the delay in the custom feature, but he hadn't expressed how upset not only he was, but his management was. He hadn't told them. They were starting to look around because it felt like a very uncomfortable conversation to have with the sales rep. But when we created space for a conversation about what the entire experience looked like, not just a specific piece of the relationship, it was part of a natural conversation. It wasn't confrontational. It was a third party. And so that lit up what I call a red flag notification, where I let my client know immediately with an email and a phone call and a text and until somebody gets back to me that, hey, there is something very timely that you need to address, And so the result of that was a very quickly scheduled on-site meeting with their customer, as well as the upper management with that customer. They laid out a new schedule to get this custom development done. And, they gained a better understanding of where each other was slowing each other down in these processes. So they not only saved the customer, they expanded what they were doing with the customer and also started doing some industry events and networking and case studies and those sorts of things to jointly tell their story. So that customer interview program made a significant difference in that relationship.
And I think it's hard, right? Like you said, somebody has a relationship with a salesperson. They don't want to disappoint them. Somebody else is really angry. They're going to go look elsewhere for a solution. I think these kinds of things happen more often than not. And in some cases, maybe the salesperson could have said, hey, I understand there's this big delay. Let me have you talk to a few more people at our company, help you understand what's happening, see how we can work together to make this go a little faster, and also dig in and ask about the impact it's having. But I think sometimes when the customer says, the salesperson delivers the bad news and the customer says, okay, nothing more is done usually. So I was dealing with that yesterday with one of my clients, where I said, okay, so they're really unhappy. What are you doing? And then, luckily they had a plan and they had rolled that plan out to the customer and they were working together. And I'm like, yes, exactly right.
Well, and that is the other benefit that can come from this is, unfortunately, it sometimes takes these sorts of situations in order for companies to recognize, okay, wait, we should never have been in this situation. Whenever there is this kind of a delay in, delivery of a feature or of a product, we need to be more aggressive in making sure that us and the customer are on the same page. So it also did within that client, drove change within their processes to make sure that they didn't end up there. That is
a good time to bring a senior executive in. When a salesperson has to deliver that kind of news and then it drags on, it's time for senior executives to talk to senior executives and discuss and strategize and understand better. And like you said, then what it did was it brought change to the organization because they understood, oh my gosh, when we delay this much, it doesn't work for our customer, and we have to figure out how to do this better, faster, easier, right?
Yeah. And another example to some degree is on the flip side of that, where there was a company that I was working with. It was also a software company. I do a lot of work within tech and manufacturing, but where they had a couple customers who were really vocal about the fact that they wanted some updates to the user interface. They felt like it looked dated, and they really wanted those updates. And so, based on feedback from a couple of those customers, my client was planning to move ahead with a pretty significant investment in updating the user interface. And so when we, rolled out the Voice of the Customer program for them, that was one of the things they wanted to focus on was, okay, well, we're going to do this update to the interface. So let's get some feedback from our customers on what it should look like. So my question then was, okay, so why are you doing this update to your interface? And they had said, well, we've heard from a couple customers. And so, we took that and we phrased the questions in such a way that we were looking for that really open, candid feedback about what kinds of improvements customers would want to see made, but we weren't making an assumption that every customer wanted to see this upgrade, that it was really important. And by approaching the interview program, not on assumption, but on truly working to curate, original candid feedback, what we found was that, there were a couple clients or a couple customers who would like to see that interface updated, but the vast majority of their customers were fine with it.
Right.
It wasn't a problem that they would, that they would rather that investment be made in other things within the, adding new features and, those sorts of things, not in updating that interface. So, and then when they circle back around to the couple, vocal clients, they weren't going to go away. They weren't going to move to a different solution if that interface wasn't updated. So that was on the flip side of it, another example where not only do you need to be aggressive in making sure that you are aware of any issues that a customer is having, you need to make sure that before you're making radically large decisions for your organization, that it isn't based on the feedback of just a couple of your customers. That even if those customers are loud, maybe those customers need to be handled in a different way. Make sure that you're getting a breadth of understanding of what needs to happen.
Well, I love this because if you are planning on making some changes or building your roadmap for the future of what features you'll have and how things will change, once you collect the information, then you build a better roadmap and share that back with your customers. So now they all know. So in this particular case, for example, maybe user interface was important, but not one of the first 3 to 5 things, but they could see that down the road, it would be improved. And that would satisfy them. Oh, okay, it's coming soon, but it's not in this round, right? So I think sometimes we're afraid maybe to share things. I don't know what happens, or maybe because we do work from a little bit a place of insecurity and not knowing, or listening just to those vocal minority, that's screaming at us about something about our product or service. So I think Voice of the Customer can be exceptionally good at that point as well. And then do you have an instance where a company really found that they were even doing better than they thought they were, where their customers were just really having a lot of accolades for them, and maybe it helped that company be more secure in doing some of the things that they were doing?
Oh, yeah. It's interesting. I have a lot of my clients who they are nervous about going through this process.
They're
right?
afraid of what they might find out, but in any case, bad or good, whatever they find out is going to help them improve, right?
That's exactly right. And, one of the things that I make sure to discuss with any of my clients who seem at all uncomfortable is it is really common for sometimes even who they think is going to be their grumpiest customer, right, to provide some really great complimentary feedback, because again, I go back to human nature because that has so much to do with this kind of work. And, there are some people who, if you have a ranking of 1 to 10, right, which that's more, definitely on the quantitative side of things, whereas I focus much more on the qualitative. But, a ranking of 1 to 10, there are plenty of people who will never give somebody a 10. They will never give anybody over an 8, right? Because they don't believe that anybody can ever, receive a 10. So when you're looking at those types of measurements, sometimes people can feel really uncomfortable with the kind of feedback that they're going to get. But the reality is that it is more based on the temperament and the personality of the customer than it is on what you were doing. So creating the right type of space, the right kind of platform for these customers to provide feedback, we very often are getting really positive, complimentary feedback that my clients are surprised by. I would say in most every interview program that we put together, that happens. So
yes,
it makes it a little easier.
We need to know what we can do better, right? We always need to know what we can do better.
Absolutely.
But I truly believe that we learn more by understanding what we do well than being focused on what we don't do well. And for example, with a sales team who's looking at their wins and their losses, everybody wants to diagnose all the losses, right? All the bad, how did we lose that deal? What happened?
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing to do occasionally, is to diagnose a loss and understand what happened and start to see, are we always losing deals because of one thing, or is it just different every time? So I do believe that's important. But what we don't do enough of is sit around and look at, how did we win this deal? What did we do well?
Yes.
Why did they buy from us, right? And with that information, I think we can fuel the momentum to close more deals, but we rarely ever look at it. And I think that voice of the customer can help us with that. So once we've said, okay, this quarter we won, these 20 deals, and they were all, $100,000 to $1 million. Yes, we lost a few deals too, but we won these 20 that brought in a lot of money. Let's now go interview those customers and find out why they bought from us. I mean, again, the salesperson can only get so much out of the customer about why they bought. But a third party who has carefully crafted the questions can go in there and ask these companies, why did you buy? What do you like? How did that work? What was easy? What was hard? Again, did we make it easy for you to be our customer? I mean, you bought from us anyway, but did we make it easy? What could we do to make it easier? So I think examining those wins and then turning those over to someone who can call and ask specifically is amazing.
Yeah. Well, that's one of when I have a client who is working on identifying, areas of improvement within their sales process, right? Because one of the other things that needs to happen with these programs is you have to identify what I call KDIs, which are key desired insights, because there is so much information that you can
people aren't going to sit for 3 hours and
right?
answer all your questions.
Yeah.
You got to be specific, right?
Exactly, right? Yeah. So, you get about 10 questions and about 30 minutes for these interviews. And so, you can do more than one interview with you can break it out, do one a quarter. Most customers are happy with that. But so for my clients who are really trying to focus on sales and in the sales process, one of the questions that I love to ask is, describe for me the point within the sales process that you made the decision to move forward. Right? Because, you can also find out information about why they move forward. You can find out information about what the specific needs were that they had, that they knew this would help to resolve. But by asking them about a specific point in time, what that does is it takes the customer back to that sales process. So now their responses are coming from a memory of that sales process. So it's not the calculated responses, that they use to make sure that they, when they were pitching, by being able to buy this product or move forward with this vendor, it brings them back to the point in time and the actual emotions that they were feeling and why they decided to choose this. And we're just able to uncover just so much more depth and colorful feedback that way. So those are the types of things that you're right. When you're working with somebody who this is what they do, they know how to ask these questions, they're sitting outside as a third party, you can generate really, really different types of responses than when it's, someone that you already have a relationship.
Well, wrapping up here, you have shared so much with us, and I really appreciate it. I know you and I are both, of course, very firm believers that this is something every CEO should invest in. And, it is an investment, and it's not a one-time deal. You need to invest in listening to your customers over and over and over again, every year, not just this year, right? And it's something that should just be budgeted in for you to do, to listen to your customers. And I highly recommend having a third party do it, because I just don't think you're going to get the same quality of information if you don't. But Tonya, just leave us with a few times when, ideas for the CEO on the times when they absolutely know they should be doing a voice of the customer survey. I mean, again, I think, at least once a year, probably twice a year, maybe even more often than that. But what are some triggers or things that would let a CEO know that it's really time to do a voice of the customer survey?
I think that the first would be if they've never done it before, right? So if a company has not put together a voice of the customer program that includes more than an online survey, then they need to set a baseline. They need to be able to, depending upon how many customers they have, ideally reach out and you have these, you offer these interviews to every customer. But it works to offer them to a subset as well. But so first set that baseline. From that point, I always suggest that companies do this at least once a year. So, establish a trigger date, something that aligns with that customer journey map, which I also believe that every company should have, is a customer journey map. So identify a point where at least once a year, you're offering this opportunity for the customers to do this interview, provide feedback. I recommend doing it at the onboarding of new customers. So after you've established a baseline, every time you close a deal with a new customer, this should be part of the onboarding process, because that gives you that opportunity to pull feedback about sales, marketing,
it's still fresh in their mind, being able to they just completed this journey with your team and purchased from you or did not purchase from you, either one at the end of that, right? So it can be part of your onboarding, but it can also be, hey, we lost these deals this quarter. Let's have someone call those companies and learn.
Yeah, doing those win-loss interviews there is so much valuable information there. You often don't get as high a percentage of participation with the loss, of course, because they're not as invested in your success moving forward. But it's still, for those you get, it's great information. And then, when there's a lot of, significant change going on within an organization, the client I mentioned who is about ready to invest in a significant upgrade to their user interface, that's a really good time to make sure that you are making decisions based on customer feedback, not based on assumption
or rolling out a new product, making major changes. Those were great times. Well, Tonya, thank you so much. This is going to be so valuable for our listeners. And I appreciate you being on my first episode of doing something a little different and bringing important information to CEOs that they can use to grow their organization. So thanks so much. And I'm sure I'll be talking to you soon.
Always. Thanks, Alice.
Thanks for tuning in to Sales Talk for CEOs. You can find me at alicehyman.com. Be sure and connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know that you heard the show. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe, write a review, and share the show with another CEO.